Me and this Swatee and Jennifer, we're both on the advisory group for Healing Solidarity, and we're here to share with you for this year's conference a little bit more about us and what Healing Solidarity means to us. So Jennifer, what are you up to at the moment, and what do you want to share?
Thanks, Swatee. So I'm Jennifer Lenfer. I am the creator of the blog howmatters.org, and Mary Ann Clements, the founder of Healing Solidarity, and I met on Twitter about a decade ago. And so have been on this sort of, at the time we connected, it was because we really felt like there was an epidemic of a lack of the ability for people to access self-care and collective care, which we didn't know the word for even then, and how that impacted our ability to show up for the work. And I was very really focused on how do we support local organizations and grassroots leadership and movements. So that has just always been those places of passion for me that brought me to Healing Solidarity. And that is what I'm kind of up to these days still and continuing. We will celebrate 10 years of How Matters, how-matters.org this year, which is amazing. And I was just thinking, like, I've had 2 or 3 careers within the aid and philanthropy sector at this point. I started out doing monitoring and evaluation because I had these like deep what works questions. And then I realized that is not the question that matters, which eventually led me to communications, because I felt like how we raise the money is actually impacting everything else. And now I'm making a transition to, I don't know what to call it still, Swatee. It's like coaching is the closest word to it, but I don't think that does it justice. I just see so many leaders in our sector, managers, people who really want to start to dismantle the way we work and think of new ways of putting together and how we support people on the ground, how we remove projectization of everything, like how do we make sure our teams actually function and collaborate well, and just a lot of questions for that. And I feel like the higher you get in organizations, the less support you actually have. And so we need to be able to offer not just like a thought partner and new ideas, but I think a lot of what I do with my clients at this point is just be their friend. Someone who can actually mirror them to them about how they're showing up and how they can create boundaries and how they can bring their best selves. And that's what I really love doing. So I'm a consultant, and I bring in that money so that I can really be a writer and a poet. And that's my true love. So that's what I'm up to.
Amazing. I love that. And I love it's almost like the journey from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Like, so I am Swatee Deepak. I am a social justice and philanthropic consultant. And like you, Jennifer, I've just had so many different kind of lives within the development sector or space. So I think have been in national level policy and like government liaison, which is where I started like that sort of research, but also policy change work, and then entered into the UN system and promptly left. It was definitely an experience, but it was.
I don't think I even knew that about you.
It was the sort of it was actually that journey of wanting to like desperately be like, because I grew up in India and have grown up in the UK and I'm based in London. and had wanted to be like, I want to go back and do something in India, and like I want to do something for the UN, because that's sort of this image of like what's brought, you know, put into you when you're growing up at school, at university. And I got that role. I had like a job with a UN agency back in Delhi. It was like dream job, and I went back and it was all sorts of issues, from just the organization, but also like the entrenched harassment as well, that was present in the space. So promptly left, went to the corporate sector for a little bit, but hated the sort of sense of, or the lack of purpose or connection, and sort of came back into the development space in fundraising and sort of government partnerships, and then sort of moved into philanthropy and led a participatory fund for adolescent girls called the With and For Girls Collective, which I've been on Healing Solidarity to talk about in previous years, but left that role earlier. And I'm sort of, I guess, this year with COVID and with, I guess, the racial justice and the Black Lives Matter uprisings around the world have really just hammered home, as Arundhati Roy would call it, the pandemic is a portal. This moment calls for transformation. It calls for reimagining. And I think that I'm in that space where I want to look at where best to put my energy to push for true transformational change through the social justice sector, through the development sector, but also knowing that transformation and reimagining and change comes with needing to identify how and when to heal, and finding your community to do that collective healing with, and those that will also support you on your own personal healing journey. Because I feel that a lot of the issues in the development space or in the social justice space, I think a lot of it, a lot of trauma is held there, but also trying to reimagine it requires unlearning, and unlearning is difficult, and it's actually sometimes like just hard and hurtful as well. So I'm just exploring that really, and working with different sort of elements, doing some movement work, but then also still working in philanthropy and kind of more mainstream development, and just looking at how I can hold healing space but also push on the transformation side.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, so many things. Swati, I always know you as someone doing a million things, so that sounds about right. And as you were talking, I was thinking that's exactly it. So this idea that we're on a personal healing journey is true. All of us, can choose to have our foot fully on that path, or be running down that path, or be on a whole other thing. But we're not doing it for ourselves. This is not about personal transformation. And I want to make that really, really clear. If we are inviting ourselves or each other into healing spaces, it's so that we can do the work together.
Yeah.
It's so that we can actually understand. And I think the roots of Healing Solidarity as a space is deeply feminist, in that the personal is political and vice versa. We don't ever get to leave that at the table.
Yeah.
The pain we carry with us, even if it's been enacted interpersonally, has ties to systems of oppression, domination, and control. And so we are all unlearning. There is not a human on the planet untouched. And so let's have honest conversations about that.
Yeah.
I think it is not that we're not professionals in our sector. Of course we are. But we are whole people also.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Healing Solidarity means to me. It's really ultimately about enabling each other to be whole.
Yeah.
And to then get some really great shit done.
Yeah, definitely.
For others. Like that all has to exist together.
I know. And I feel like actually we're in a moment at the moment, and any moment actually, like there's a lot of co-option in the development sector and even beyond the development sector of, you know, activist language. I'm an activist, this is a movement, this is organizing. And you know, I think it's as we use and we co-opt those kind of words into the space, we also need to be aware of like where they draw from and what that actually means to model that. And I think one of the things that I really do like continually learn from movements on is the fact that movements require as many people to be a part of that movement as possible. And so holding a space that is pushing forward while at the same time being welcoming and affirming to people with multiple intersecting identities is actually critical and crucial to movements having any success for the change that they demand. And I feel like in the same thing, you know, we're all in a really difficult moment globally across all industries. You know, there is huge levels of unemployment. There are, you know, just so many people who are being furloughed, who have job insecurity. You know, whole industries are like shutting down or like are becoming increasingly fragile, and resources are becoming scarce. And so whether you work in development or social justice or not, the veil has been pulled back for everybody. Everyone is able to see how fractured our world is, how fractured our economies are, and also seeing the value of things in the same way. What's the value of our critical care workers? What is the value of care work as a whole in society? And I feel like because of that, we're in a moment where the development sector has to reimagine its role as well in galvanizing all these people who finally understood, or can not, you know, not to you know, disrespect their understanding at all. It's more that sometimes you just need space to be able to see clearly. And so it's not that those people have not been able to see things, it's that the impact has not been felt so close to home. And we're in a moment where we do need to reimagine our development sector, and we, you know, which is why, and we need to also hold healing space. Like this is a moment of also collectivized trauma for us all. You know, we've all been experiencing a hugely traumatic pandemic period. And I remember actually when Healing Solidarity launched like 3 years ago, having an online conference felt so new age, you know. Like, obviously we'd all been to like webinars and had been on the odd Zoom, but it wasn't like you were on 4 Zooms or 5 Zooms a day, which I think is a norm for many of us, just because of the ways that we work and the ways that we want to connect to each other and connect to community. But in the same way, it's like, you know, that has now become the norm. And so we need to think ahead now to embrace what that change looks like for us to create the new norm, and to make sure that this moment is a portal that enables the transformations we all know need to happen as well.
Yeah. We want to welcome and usher in that change and be well resourced for the dismantling and the rebuilding.
Yeah.
That's what Healing Solidarity really means. And I think as an advisor group, we really keep our eye on a few things, which is political courage, cultural humility, and just how do we build up an ethic of care? Because our organizations, harm has been done, not only to our partners, but to our staff, to our supporters who are treated like cash machines. Like we really have to understand that our sector was built on some pretty shaky premises of charity, and charity ultimately always puts someone in a higher position, and that's not it. If COVID has taught us nothing, if climate change is not telling us anything, it's that we are wholly dependent on each other, not even interdependent. My well-being is absolutely tied up with yours. And that is, I am shocked sometimes at how that is still up for debate in the world, but it is, it is one thing that I've seen so much since How Matters began, since Healing Solidarity began. There's been these little hubs online where people could find each other and feel supported and not feel like they're an alien or losing their mind, or because that's what happens, and our organizations start to gaslight us, and we need each other to say, no, what your gut is telling you is actually true. It doesn't feel good for a reason, and let's talk about what that reason actually is. Let's talk about the colonial pathway that was laid, that the development organizations follow. Like, let's just talk about it, and then figure out how to do it differently. We need, and we all just need each other. We've really got to break down this sense of isolation, and know that deep and wide throughout this sector are people questioning the very fundamentals of what it means to move from charity to solidarity. And it means vastly different ways of working. And that is threatening and scary and uncertain. But guess what? So is the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's just be in it together.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think that it's, I'm actually really excited for the development space because of this. And I feel, to your point, it's scary and there's a lot of insecurity that will come with it. But I guess for me, I'm just thinking also about what healing solidarity means to me, and for me it's not just the words, it's the space that has been created by the whole community and with everybody involved, and of course Marianne as well for like initiating this space. But I think back to the fact that it was my first understanding or introduction to healing solidarity was about a reimagining of international development. And I think we are, we've been reimagining from then, but I think it's not just reimagining the development sector. To your point, we need to reimagine whole ways that we can create new solidarity economies that we all interact within. We need to rebuild fractured economic models and systems, and development organizations need to be in solidarity with movements to actually enable that kind of change to happen. And I think as well, it's just been interesting to see alongside that just all what has happened just since March this year. We have had the INGO, the international NGO sector, and all these big agencies that operate around the world, to go from having all these expat staff based in all these countries and paying for them to be there because they're the experts needed there, and suddenly in a climate of tremendous change and actually real crisis and need for those countries where they are based, suddenly if you are a worker that was based and working for if I was still in my UN agency job, and suddenly I was like, well, I might be getting paid more than my local team members, but now it's time for me to hop on home back to London where I've got the NHS and I'm safer in some way. Then I think it also, that has exposed a lot of the fractures in our sector. Why is that the case? And now those same countries are not able, they're collapsing, their health systems are collapsing, and ultimately the same actors who continue to propel change, who are local grassroots leaders, organizations, movement leaders, they are the ones that are still keeping their countries, their economies afloat during this period. And of course, development and relief agencies are hugely important. Relief efforts are hugely important at the moment. There are, millions of people who are on the poverty line and have been plunged into starvation a lot quicker because of what's happening. But that's all to do with the fact that, our economies have extracted for them for years and they haven't been able to grow any sort of changes. And obviously we could talk a lot about what the particular models look like. But for me, I think just thinking back to healing solidarity, I do think, you know, that coupled with the fact that there have been racial justice uprisings and a need to really reimagine and re-examine what's happening in our space at the moment. What are the ways that white supremacy shows up in the workplace? And I think, you know, none of us have been able to escape that many women's rights organizations, feminist organizations in the international development space have been exposed for, you know, the racist practices and the experiences of Black, Indigenous, people of color that are within those organizations as well. And so I think we also just need to be aware that that has unveiled something in our sector as well, and which is again hugely important. And so we're at a place where we do need to still move towards collective healing. We do need to reimagine and actually live what solidarity looks like. But we also are at a point where that needs to happen to support that reimagining, because this, I think a moment like this is a historic one. I don't believe that there will be another period of change as significant as this one in my lifetime. And so I just want to play some role in being able to catalyze towards the right kind of changes in this world.
Yeah, there's so much when there's uncertainty, there's just so much possibility. And we've got to build our capacity to hold both of those things. We've created systems that are incredibly linear and deterministic and instrumentalized, you know, A plus B equals C. And we've known for decades now that's not how social change actually happens in any way, shape, or form. And so that's all, as you say, being really shaken out at this moment. So how do we build up our personal reserves to hold that tension, to hold that between possibility and restriction, because there's also a time of restriction for a lot of folks. And how do we build systems of accountability that are not sort of mapped to these old systems? That's the real juicy stuff. And I feel like there's so many people like yourself who are in the leadership of this Healing Solidarity Collective and our members, that we have so much knowledge and wisdom about how to do this. And our job right now is to really go deep into the listening and learning, to know that there are social movement leaders around the world for whom none of this is new. None of this is new. And we can put ourselves in the position of learner, so that reimagining actually has teeth. It's not some utopia. It's not some in the offing. It's actually now. It's actually right here in front of us.
Yeah.
And it will mean being braver. It will mean standing up to people who are still mapped or beholden to the old ways of doing and being. And we get to just love on them. And man, oh man, does that take a lot of energy sometimes, because you're just so frustrated. You're just so done and over it, and you can't take it anymore. But if we're not in solidarity with each other, if we're not supporting each other in community and doing this together, what happens is cynicism sets in. And no one joined this sector to just be a bureaucratic paper pusher.
No one
or
did.
to just have given up hope, right? That's our actual presence in this sector, in this profession, in this role that we have of whatever it is because we fundamentally believe this can and will need to be different.
Yes.
And this hope cannot be wishy-washy. It cannot be brah brah, I'm making a difference today. It has to be really pragmatic.
Yeah.
it cannot be without teeth and fierceness and real proposals for change. And that's why I left expat life.
Yeah.
I could not sit around and drink gin and tonics anymore and bitch about the state of the system.
Yeah.
And what are you all doing about it?
Yeah.
So I came home because I realized the source of the money, where the money is flowing from, is here, and I've got to chip away at the base of this thing if we're ever going to get to a point at which I understood community development, right? Real grassroots solidarity, real I've got your back.
Yeah.
So different than let's build a well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we go. We knew even before COVID all the problems in this sector. We absolutely knew it over, like, I studied in grad school 20 years ago. We knew it was on the, not, we knew there were issues then. And it's funny when I talk to students now, as you mentioned also earlier, it's a very existential question.
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to be abroad? Am I, like, who am I in this? And you are you.
Yeah.
If you are in a helping profession of any sort, which I do consider this a helping profession akin to social work or teaching or anything like that, who you are matters. How you show up matters.
Yeah.
How you build relationships matters. And we need to be thinking about the reimagining. And for me, it's also about rebalancing. We've been out of balance as humanity for a bit, quite a bit now. I don't know that it ever gets perfectly balanced. I don't know that there is some state of being where humans start to love each other better, and not waiting for that day. Like I said, it's got to be right now.
Yeah.
Well, let's just do it. Let's stop talking theory. Let's realize that people's lives are not an abstraction.
Yeah.
And get into practice. The day to day is how we change the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
It's not sexy. It's not some big project that you can put a pretty acronym on.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me, actually, like something you said about the now and about let's not wait for, I don't know, a qualitative study to come out from an institution that's based in Europe or North America to tell us that something works. And it reminds me actually of just like working with young and adolescent girl activists as well, is, many of them say, don't wait for evidence. Our stories are enough. And that for me really resonates, is that people are living this now. Those realities are felt now. They can't afford to wait. Like what's happening to children now, if we wait 4 years, they're not children anymore. And then the rest of their life or the next stage is actually going to be focused on healing, and you're never going to actually address the issues. And so, yeah, I think that for me, it's like trying to model, what does that mean? Don't wait for the evidence. Our stories are enough. And how do we make sure that resonates within our sector, and we create change for the people and the communities that we have been inspired by? Like, to your point, no one came into this space to be a bureaucratic paper pusher. Everyone wanted to move into this space and has come into this space because they believe that change needs to happen and that change is possible and that they are an agent of enabling that change. And so we need to make it happen, and we need to come together and collectivize to make that change happen, because it's now is a moment.
Now it is. Thank you for this conversation. It's been amazing.
I know. Thank you.
When I started Healing Solidarity, I had no funding for this project, and I didn't know if anyone would listen to the first conversations that I recorded. At the beginning of 2020, I brought together the advisory circle, and they've been helping me to begin to transform this project into something that can be collectively held and run. We want to bring in people who can support the work of our online space and events, both during this annual conference and throughout the year, providing healing and reflective spaces for those who are committed to reimagining international development. And to do that, we need your help. We hope that this conference and our online space feels like a place that you can belong in all your questions, in your own need to heal, in your anger about injustice, and in your passion for change. And we want to meet you there more resourcefully, offer you more, create some of the amazing ideas that some of you have shared with us over the past few years. Please consider joining us this year as a sustaining member of Healing Solidarity. We'd love to have you as a part of that in the coming year.